Hello? Welcome to Night, where the dark speaks and true stories haunt. This channel brings you real horror experiences, urban legends, and chilling encounters that people have truly lived through. Every episode is based on actual stories, told in a way that pulls you into the shadows. From haunted houses to unsolved disappearances, strange family secrets to ancient curses, we explore the kinds of stories that leave you questioning what's real. Perfect for late night listening or a lonely commute home. Subscribe and let the night in. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Story 1. In 1986, my family went missing at a carnival. I know what happened to them, and I want revenge. Between 1965 and 1987, a total of 12 people went missing from Mr. Fulcrum's funhouse. The pattern which emerged from these disappearances is that no one was alone when they were taken. Either families or couples would enter any one of those tall, brightly colored tents and never walk back out. Even though at times these tents were occupied by hundreds of potential witnesses, these cases baffled detectives. How can an entire family seated in the stands be there one moment, laughing and enjoying popcorn, and gone the next? At first, the disappearances didn't do much to deter the steady flow of attendees who wished to see legendary attractions like The Visitor or Madame Levitt's group seances. They thought it was all part of the show, an immersive event brought to you by Mr. Fulcrum's brilliant mind. It wouldn't be the first time, after all, that he had done such a thing. On one occasion, through a complex assembly of visual and auditory trickery, he made the goats at the petting zoo stand up on their hind legs and talk. I will not repeat here what they said. Another time, an employee dressed as a giant were with the face of an old man used a series of underground tunnels to scare guests by randomly springing up in the earth in front of them or by grabbing their ankles and tripping them. However, it was not just the creativity of Mr. Fulcrum's tricks or the sights which made people flock in droves. You could go there, smack dab in the middle of nowhere, and taste foods from faraway lands like Romania or Azerbaijan. You could watch Siberian tigers fight Alaskan grizzlies, or, if violence wasn't your thing, wander to the world's largest Hortus conclusus. If you were lucky, you even had the chance to meet the Green Man. All of this popularity and wealth should have made Mr. Fulcrum one of the most famous people in the world. Yet very little was, or still is, known about him. Those who saw him in person, both foreign and domestic, claimed they were not able to tell where he was from based off his appearance, though he had a notable mid-Atlantic accent. He seemed polite and a bit on the quiet side, though it didn't really matter because whenever he spoke, people listened. Curiously, even back then there were rumors of a darker side to Mr. Fulcrum. Dogs would either growl or run away when they saw him. Rooms felt colder when he entered. Children would cry and clutch their parents when he walked past. But that hardly steered people away from the carnival. It was just too good. They said there would only ever be one Mr. Fulcrum's funhouse, always and forever. It was an empire in its own right, unshakable and beyond us all. We were supposedly lucky to have gotten to experience it. I cannot stress enough how high it was held in the public eye. Yet the illusion could not last forever. No mind, not even Mr. Fulcrum's, is immune from error. In June of 1986, a family disappeared during the main event of the evening, Mr. Fulcrum's magic show. As it happened in the past, it went unnoticed for the rest of the night, and likely would have gone unnoticed for much longer. Everyone was too engrossed by the sword swallowers and fire singers. But the next morning, a sobbing boy walked into the local police station and reported the disappearance of his family. That boy was me. 39 years ago, my adopted family fell through a gap that suddenly opened in the stands. I watched as they were taken by circus staff dressed as clowns. Being only 7 years old at the time, I thought it was all part of the act and waited excitedly for them to appear on stage next to Mr. Fulcrum himself. But as the show went on and they didn't show up, I began to grow more and more worried. Then, as part of the final trick of the night, Madame Levitt took the stage next to Mr. Fulcrum, who tipped his hat to her and stepped to the side. She was a gorgeous woman. Thick and glossy black curls tumbled down her bare shoulders as she slowly walked forward. Hands stretched to her sides to the cheer of hundreds. Dozens of rings tipped with multiple kinds of precious gemstones shimmered in the firelight conjured by the fire singers, and her fingers twitched and bent in all manner of shapes as she lifted her face to the ceiling and spoke in a voice that didn't sound like it belonged to her body. Then, before us all, she levitated. The audience, not. The wave of sound drowning out my tears and hysterics as I frantically searched the stage for my family. Madame Levitt spun on an invisible string as she continued to chant, her green dress spinning and spinning and spinning until she was like a tabletop, a blur of sound and color. There was a loud pop accompanied by a burst of energy that splashed over the laughing audience. And then she was gone, along with Mr. Fulcrum. I never saw my family again, and the police never found any trace of what happened to them either. Yet for once, they had a genuine witness to one of the disappearances at Mr. Fulcrum's funhouse. My story made it over to the press, and once the public saw me crying and begging for the return of my parents on television, there was an uproar for transparency from Mr. Fulcrum and company. They never gave it, and that possibly might have been the end of things. Then another couple went missing the next year, and that's when the government finally got involved. Both federal agents and local law enforcement arrived on scene, and there were arrests made. Apparently, quite a few of the staff had warrants out for their arrests and were wanted for very severe crimes. When other places within the carnival were raided, officers found them curiously empty of the attractions they once held, and there was no sign of Mr. Fulcrum or Madame Levitt. None of the staff told the police where they had gone, and it was not clear whether that was due to ignorance or fear. Upon finding the tunnels, agents were surprised to learn they stretched for miles and formed a network that was so convoluted it took months to map it all out. And there are some who think there were other paths that went unnoticed. Here, I want to make special note that one agent reported finding a tunnel that went down so far that a rock he dropped never made a sound. From what I heard, he was put behind a desk for the remainder of his career for making that statement to the press. Years passed, and nothing more really came out about Mr. Fulcrum. Nothing public. But there were whispers and rumors that I began personally track down after I decided to not re-enlist. I guess here I should mention a bit about what ended up happening to me after I lost my family. I was placed back into foster care, and as soon as I was 18, I joined the Marines. It was an easy decision. I was willing to do anything that would get me off the streets and into a job that would teach me how to never rely on anyone again. I want to become so strong and capable that I could protect myself and those I love. And throughout that entire grueling process, I never forgot the hate I feel towards myself for failing to protect the most important people in my life. Honestly, there are times where I wonder if I made the wrong choice. I had a great career with the Marines, and my travels to different parts of the world took away years of my life and burned through a lot of cash I saved. I never married or had children that I know of, and I suspect this path will be the end of me, but I just can't let them go. My parents were the best people I have ever known. They took in a boy that no one else wanted and showered me with love. And then they were taken from me, and I was thrown back into the hell that is the American foster care system. I need to know why they and all those other people were taken. I need to know what their fates were. Most of all, I need revenge. I have wandered through the dark places of the world for over 10 years, all to find a lead on the one person who can tell me where Mr. Fulcrum is. Madame Levitt has a small studio apartment where she does palm readings, fortune-telling, and the odd seance here and there. I have heard she's gone straight and isn't into the evil shit anymore. She's also very hard to get an appointment with, but do some work as security for some pretty big names in the entertainment industry, and you'll find you can secure a meeting. Tonight is the night where Madame Levitt will tell me where Fulcrum went. I am leaving this as a record in case I don't make it back. But if I do, you will be hearing from me. I'd ask for luck, but that would be to rely on someone outside myself, and that I simply will not do. Story 2. Each summer, a child will disappear into the forest, only coming back after a year has passed. 30 minutes later, a different child will emerge from that forest, last seen exactly 1 year prior. This cycle has been going on for decades, and it needs to be stopped. 3 years ago, Amelia awoke to find dozens of ticks attached to her body, crawling over her bedroom windowsills and through the floorboards just to get a small taste of her precious blood. That's how we knew my sister had been selected. She was ecstatic. Everyone was actually our classmates, our teachers, the mailman, our town's deacon, the kind Colombian woman who owned the grocery store. They were all elated by the news. Amelia's a great kid, a real fine specimen. Makes total sense to me, my grandpa remarked, his tone swollen with pride. Even our parents were excited, in spite of the fact that their only daughter would have to live alone in the woods for an entire year. Doing God only knows to survive. The night of the summer solstice, Amelia would leave, and the previous year's selected would return, passing each other for a brief moment on the bridge that led from Camp Ehrlich to an isolated plateau of land known as Glass Harbor. You see, being selected was a great honor. It wasn't some overblown, richest kid wins popularity contest, either. There were no judges to bribe, no event to practice for, no lucky winners or shoe-ins to the esteemed position. Selection was pure, because nature decided. You were chosen only on the grounds that you deserved the honor, an unbiased evaluation of your soul, through and through. The town usually had a good idea who that person was by early June. Once nature decided, there was no avoiding their messengers. Amelia could have bathed in a river of insect repellent, and it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. The little bloodsuckers would have still been descending upon her in the hundreds, thirsty for the anointed crimson flowing through her veins. Every summer around the campfire, the counselors would close out their explanation of the selection process with a cryptic mantra, 17 words that had been practically branded on the inside of my skull. Given how much I heard them growing up, those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential. Those who return a year later are perfect. Amelia was so happy. I vividly remember her grinning at me, warm green eyes burning with excitement. Although I smiled back at her, I found myself unable to share in the emotion. I desperately want to be excited for my sister. Maybe then I'd finally feel normal, I contemplated. Unfortunately, that excitement never arrived. No matter how much I learned about selection, no matter how many times the purpose of the ritual was explained, no matter how much it seemed to exhilarate and inspire everyone else, the tradition never sat right with me. Thinking about it always caused my guts to churn like I was seasick. I reached over the kitchen table, thumb and finger molded into a pincer, while Amelia gushed about the news. There had been a black and brown adult deer tick crawling across her cheek. The creature's movements were unsteady and languid, probably on account of it being partially engorged with her blood already. It creeped closer and closer to her upper lip. I didn't want the parasite to attach itself there, so I was looking to intervene. Right as I was about to pinch the tiny devil, my mother slapped me away. Hard. I yelped and pulled my hand back, hot tears welling under my eyes. When I peered up at her, she was standing aside the table with her face scrunched into a scowl, a plate of sizzling bacon in one hand, and the other pointed at me in accusation. "Don't you dare, Thomas. We've taught you better." I understand feeling envious, but that's no excuse. I didn't bother explaining what I was actually feeling. Honestly, being skeptical of selection, even if that skepticism was born out of protective instinct for my older sister, would have sent my mother into hysterics. It was safer for me to let her believe I was envious. Instead, I just nodded. Her scowl unfurled into a tenuous smile at the sight of my contrition. "Look at me, honey. You're special too, don't worry," she said. The announcement was sluggish and monotonous, like she was having a difficult time convincing herself of that fact, let alone me. I struggled to maintain eye contact, despite her request. My gaze kept drifting away. Nightmarish movement in the periphery stole my attention, as Mom was attempting to reassure me. I witnessed a tick squirm over the corner of Amelia's grin and disappear into her mouth. My sister didn't even seem to notice. Like I said, she was ecstatic. Every kid between the ages of 7 and 17 spent their summer at Camp Ehrlich, no exceptions. From what I remember, no one seemed to mind the inflexibility of that edict. Our town had a habit of churning out some pretty affluent people, and they'd often give back to the camp that gave them everything with sizable grants and donations. Because of that, the campgrounds were both luxurious and immaculately maintained. 8 tennis courts, 2 baseball fields, a climbing wall, an archery range, indoor bunks with AC, a roller hockey rink, etc., etc., etc. I won't bore you with a comprehensive list of every ostentatious amenity. The point is, we all loved it. How could we not? I suppose that was the insidious trick that propped up the whole damn system. 95% of the time, Camp Ehrlich was great. It was like an amusement park / recreation center hybrid that was free for us to attend because it was a town requirement. A child's paradise hidden in the wilderness of northern Maine, mandated for use by the local government. The other 5% of the time, however, they were indoctrinating us. It was a perfectly devious ratio. The vast majority of our days didn't involve discussing selection. They sprinkled it in gently. It was never heavy-handed, nor did it bleed into the unrelated activities. A weird assembly one week, a strange arts and crafts session the next, none of them taking us away from the day-to-day festivities long enough to draw our ire. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. The key was they got to us young, before we could even understand what we were being subjected to. Their teaching started to make a perverse sort of sense. Selection is just an important tradition, a unique part of our town's history that other people may not understand. But that doesn't make it wrong. Every prom designates a king and queen, right? Most jobs have an employee of the month. The selected are no different. Special people with a special purpose on a very special day. The selected don't leave forever. No, they always come back to us, safe and sound. Better, actually, think about all the grown-ups that were selected when they were kids and all the important positions they hold now. Senators, scientists, lawyers, physicians, CEOs. Isn't our town just great? Aren't we all so happy? Shouldn't we want to spread that happiness across the world? That would be the neighborly thing to do, right? What a load of bullshit. Couldn't tell you exactly why I was born with immunity to the propaganda. Certainly didn't inherit it from my parents. Didn't pick it up from any wavering friends, either. There was just something unsettling about the selection ceremony. I always felt this invisible frequency vibrating through the atmosphere on the night of the summer solstice. A cosmic scream emanating from the land across the bridge, transmitting a blasphemous message that I could not seem to hide from. The selected endured unimaginable pain during their year on Glass Harbor. It changed them, and it wasn't for their benefit. It wasn't really for ours, either. Okay, so tell me, who was the first selected? I demanded. The amphitheater went silent, and the camp counselor directing the assembly glared at me. Kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Amelia rested a pale, pleading hand on top of mine. Her fingers dappled an assortment of differently sized ticks, like she was flaunting a collection of oddly shaped rings. Tom, please don't make a fuss. She whimpered, for better or worse. I ignored her. It was a week until the summer solstice, and I had become progressively more uncomfortable with the idea of losing my sister to Glass Harbor for an entire goddamn year. How do you mean? The counselor asked from the stage. Rage sizzled over my chest like a grease burn. He knew what I was getting at. I mean, you're explaining it like there's always been a swap. One selected leaves Camp Ehrlich. One selected returns from Glass Harbor. But that can't have been the case with the first person. It doesn't make sense. There wouldn't have been anyone already on Glass Harbor to swap with. So my question is, who was the first selected? Who left Camp Ehrlich to live on Glass Harbor without the promise of being swapped out a year down the road? It was a reasonable question, but those sessions weren't intended to be a dialogue. I could practically feel everyone praying that I would just shut up. The counselor, a lanky, bohemian-looking man in his late 50s, forced a smile onto his face and began reciting a contentless hodgepodge of buzzwords and platitudes. Well, Tom, selection is a tradition older than time. It's something we've always done, and something we'll always continue to do, because it's making the world a better place. You see, those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential, and those who... I interrupted him. I couldn't stand to hear that classic tagline. Not again. Not while Amelia sat next to me, covered in parasites, nearly passing out from the constant exsanguination. You're Not answering my question. But fine. If you don't like that one, here's a few others. How does selection make the world a better place? Why have we ever been told what the selected do on Glass Harbor? How do they change? Why don't the selected who return tell us anything about the experience? And for Christ's sake, how are we all comfortable letting this happen to our friends and family? I gestured towards Amelia, a pallid husk of the vibrant girl she used to be, slumped lifelessly in her chair. The counselor snapped his fingers and looked to someone at the very back of the amphitheater. Seconds later, I was violently yanked to my feet by a pair of men in their early 20s and dragged outside against my will. They didn't physically hurt me, but they did incarcerate me. I spent the next 7 days locked in one of the treatment rooms located in the camp sick bay. Unfortunately, maybe intentionally, they placed me in a room on the 3rd floor, facing the south side of Camp Ehrlich. That meant I had an excellent view of the ritual grounds, an empty plot of land at the edge of camp. A cruel choice that only became crueler when the summer solstice finally rolled around. As the sun fell, I paced around the room in the throes of a panic attack. I slammed my fist against the door, imploring them to let me out. I'm sorry for the way I behaved. Really, I wasn't thinking straight. I begged, just, please, let me see Amelia one last time before she goes. No response. There was no one present in the sick bay to hear my groveling. Everyone, the staff, the kids, the counselors, were all gathered on the ritual grounds. No less than 1,000 people singing, lighting candles, laughing, hugging, and dancing. I watched when the elders traced the outline of Amelia's vasculature on her legs and arms in fine, black ink, a ceremonial marking to empower the 16-year-old for the journey to come. I tried not to look, but I couldn't help myself. The crowd went eerily silent and averted their eyes from Amelia and the pathway that led out of Camp Ehrlich. As was tradition, for the first time in my life, I did not follow suit. My eyes remained pressed against a glass window, glued to my sister. She was clearly weak on her feet. She lumbered forward, stumbling multiple times as she pressed on, inching closer and closer to the forest. As instructed, she followed the light of the candles into a palisade of thick, ominous pine trees. Supposedly, the flickering lights would guide her to the bridge. And then Amelia was gone, swallowed whole by the shadow-cast thicket. I never got to say goodbye. 30 minutes later, another figure appeared at the forest's edge. Damien, last year selected, walked quietly into view. He then rang a tiny bell he'd been gifted before leaving 365 days prior. That's all the counselors ever gave the selected. No food, no survival gear, no water. Just an antique handbell with a rusted, greenish bell bearing. The crowd erupted at the sound of his return. Once the festivities died down, they finally let me out of my cage. Over the next year, I continued to feel the repercussions of my outburst. When I arrived home from camp in the fall, my parents were livid. They had been thoroughly briefed on my descent. Dad screamed. Mom refused to say anything to me at all. Grandpa just held a look of profound sadness in his eyes, though I'm not sure that was entirely because of his disappointment in me. I think he missed Amelia. God, I did too. None of my classmates RSVP'd for my 14th birthday party. Not sure if their parents forbade them from attending, or if they themselves didn't want to be associated with a social pariah. Either way, the rejection was agonizing. For a while, I was broken. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't really think much. No, I simply carried my body from one place to another, kept up appearances as best I could. Unilateral conformity seemed like the only route to avoiding more pain. One night, that all changed. I was cleaning out the space under my bed when I found it. The homemade booklet felt decidedly fragile in my hands. I sneezed from inhaling dust, and I nearly ended up snapping the thing in half. When Amelia and I were kids, back before I'd even been introduced to Camp Ehrlich, we used to make comics together. The one I cradled in my hands detailed a highly stylized account of how me and her had protected a helpless turtle from a shark attack at the beach. In the climatic panels, Amelia roundhouse kicked the creature's head, while I grabbed the turtle and carried it to safety. Beautifully dumb and tragically nostalgic, that booklet reawakened me. She really was my best friend. At first, it was just sorrow. I hadn't felt any emotions in a long while, so even the cold embrace of melancholy was a relief. That sorrow didn't last, however. In the blink of an eye, it fell to the background, outshined by this blinding supernova of white-hot anger. I shot a hand deeper under the bed, procured my old little league bat, gripped the handle tightly, and beat my mattress to a pulp. Battered the poor thing with wild abandon until my breathing turned ragged. The primordial catharsis felt amazing. Not only that, but I derived a bit of a wisdom from the tantrum. What I did wasn't too loud, and I expressed my discontent behind closed doors. A tactical release of rage, in direct comparison to my outburst at Camp Ehrlich the summer before. Expressing my skepticism like that was short-sighted. It felt like the right thing to do, but God was it loud. Not only that, but the display outed me as a non-believer, and what did I have to show for it? Nothing. Amelia still left for Glass Harbor, and none of my questions received answers. Because of course they didn't. The people who kept this machine running wouldn't be inclined to give out that information just because I asked with some anger stewing in my voice. If I wanted answers, I'd need to find them myself, and I'd need to do it quietly. For months later, I was back at Camp Ehrlich. Thankfully, the counselors hadn't decided to confine me as a prophylactic measure on the night of the solstice. I did a good job convincing them of my newfound obedience, so they allowed me to participate in the festivities. That year selected was only 10 years old, a shy boy named Henry. I watched with a covert disgust as the counselors helped him take his iron pills every morning, trying to counterbalance the anemic effects of his infestation. Everyone bowed their heads and closed their eyes as I listened to the sad sounds of Henry softly plodding into the forest. I reviewed what I'd learned about Glass Harbor through my research. Unfortunately, I hadn't found much. Maybe there wasn't much out there to find, or maybe I wasn't scouring the right corners of the internet. What I discovered was interesting, sure, but it didn't untangle the mystery by any stretch of the imagination, either. Still, it had been better than finding nothing, and Amelia was due to return that night. I wanted to arm myself with as much knowledge as humanly possible before I saw her again. Glass Harbor was about 2 square miles of rough, uninhabited terrain. A plateau situated above a freshwater river, running through a canyon hundreds of feet below. The only easy way onto the landmass was a wooden bridge built back in the 1950s. At one point, there had been plans to construct a water refinery on Glass Harbor. Multiple news outlets released front-page articles espousing how beneficial the project was going to be for the community, both from a financial and from a public health perspective. Clean water and fresh money for a better community. One of the titles read. All that hubbub, all that media coverage, and then nothing. Not a peep. No reports on how construction was progressing. No articles on the refinery's completion. For some reason, the project just vanished. It has to be related. I thought, the ticks draining blood, the idea of a water refinery. There's a connection there. A replacement of fluid. Detoxification, or something. Truthfully, I was grasping at straws. Amelia will fill in the rest for me. I'm sure of it. I was so devastating naive back then. None of the selected ever talk about what transpires on Glass Harbor. It's considered very disrespectful to ask them about it, too. But it's Amelia, I rationalized. She'll tell me. Of course she'll tell me. The somber chiming of a tiny handbell rang through the air. My head shot up, and there she was, standing tall on the edge of the forest. Amelia looked healthy, vital. Her skin was pest-free and no longer pale. She wasn't emaciated. Her body was lean and muscular. She was wearing the clothes that she left in, blue jeans and a black Mars Volta t-shirt, but they weren't dirty. No, they appeared pristine. There wasn't a single speck of dirt on her outfit. We all leapt to our feet, cheering. For a second, I felt normal, elated to have my sister back. But before I could truly revel in the celebration, a similar frequency assaulted my ears. That horrible cosmic scream from the back of the crowd. I stared at my sister, wide-eyed. There was something wrong with her. I just knew it. My attempts to badger Amelia into discussing her time on Glass Harbor proved fruitless over the following few weeks. I started off subtle. I hinted to her that I knew about the water refinery in passing, nudged her to corroborate the existence of that enigmatic building. "You must have come across it," I whispered one night, waiting for her to respond from the top bunk of our private cabin. I know she heard me, but she pretended to be asleep. Adolescent passion is such a fickle thing. I was so headstrong initially, so confident that Amelia and I would crack the mysteries of selection wide open. But when she continued to stonewall me, my once voracious confidence was completely snuffed out. Emotionally exhausted and profoundly forlorn, I let it go. At the end of the day, Amelia did come back. Mostly. If I didn't think about it, I was often able to convince myself that she never left in the first place. On the surface, she acted like the sister I'd lost. Her smile was familiar, her mannerisms nearly identical. But she was different, even if it was subtle. An encounter I had with her early one August morning all but confirmed that fact. I woke up to the sounds of muffled retching coming from the bathroom, followed by whispering and then again retching. I creeped out of bed. Neon red digits on our cabin's alarm clock read 4:58 a.m. I tiptoed over to the bathroom door, careful to avoid the floorboards that I knew creaked under pressure. More retching, more whispering. I could tell it was Amelia's voice. For some inexplicable reason, though, the bathroom lights weren't flicked on. As gently as I could, I pushed the door open. My eyes scoured the darkness, searching for my sister. Given the retching, I expected to see her huddled up in front of the toilet, but she wasn't there. Eventually, I landed on her silhouette. She was inside the shower with the sliding glass door closed, sitting on the floor with her back turned away from me. Honestly, I have a hard time recalling the exact order of what happened next. All I remember vividly is the intense terror that coursed through my body, heart thumping against my ribcage, cold sweat dripping down my feet and onto the tile floor, hands tremoring with a manic rhythm. "Amelia, are you all right?" I whimpered. The whispering and retching abruptly stopped. I grabbed the handle and slid the glass door to the side. A musty odor exploded out from the confined space. It was earthy but also rotten smelling, like algae on the surface of a lake. My eyes immediately landed on the shower drain. There were a handful of small coral-shaped tubes sprouting from the divots. Amelia was bent over the protrusions. She had her hands cupped beside them. An unidentifiable liquid dripped from the tubes into her hands. Once she had accumulated a few tablespoons of the substance, she brought her hands to her mouth and ferociously drank the offering. I gasped. Amelia slowly rotated her head towards me, coughing and gagging as she did. Her eyes were lifeless. Her expression was vacant and disconnected. In a raspy, waterlogged voice, she said, "It's such a heavy burden to carry the new blood, Tom." The previously inert tubes rapidly extended from the drain and shot towards me. I screamed, or I thought about screaming. It all happened so quickly. Next I remember, I woke up in bed. Amelia vehemently denied any of that happening. She insisted it was a bad dream. Eventually, I actively chose to believe her. It was just easy that way. From that summer on, Amelia's life got progressively better, and mine got progressively worse. She graduated valedictorian of her class, received a full ride to an Ivy League college with plans to study biochemistry. She's on track to becoming the next Surgeon General. My dad would say, Amelia had plenty of close friends to celebrate her continued achievements as well. Me, on the other hand, barely made it through high school. No close friend to speak of, though I do have a steady girlfriend. We initially bonded over a shared hatred of selection. Over the last year, Hannah's been my rock. We fantasied about exposing selection to the world at large, writing up and publishing our own personal accounts of the horrific practice, hoping to get the FBI involved or something. Recent events have forced our hand earlier than we would have liked. 3 weeks ago, Amelia died in a car crash. Her death sent shockwaves through our town's social infrastructure, but not just for the obvious reasons. Everyone's grieving, myself included, but it was something my dad whispered to my grandpa at her funeral that really got me concerned. None of the selected have ever died before. Not to my knowledge, at least. By definition, this shouldn't have happened. Does it break the deal? Does anyone know what to do about this? The more I reflected on it, the more I realized that my dad was right. I didn't personally know all the recently selected. There's a lot of them and they've scattered themselves throughout the world. But I'd never heard of any of them dying before. Not a single one. Don't worry, my grandpa replied. We can fix this. It won't be ideal, but it will work. This morning, I woke up before my alarm rang due to a peculiar sensation, a powerful need to the inside curve of my ear. My sleepy fingers traced the appendage until they stumbled upon a firm, pulsing boil that hadn't been there the night before. A fully engorged ear tick was hooked into the flesh of my ear. I found 30 other ticks attached to my body in the bathroom this morning, on my palms, in my hair, over my back. This is only the beginning. 2. The solstice is only 6 days away. Please help me. I don't want to change. I don't want to go to Glass Harbor. I don't want to carry the new blood. Story 3. My wife came back from the dead, but she doesn't know she died. We buried my wife on a cold Tuesday in March. The cancer had eaten her away until she was a whisper of the woman she used to be. The last thing she said to me, through cracked lips, was, "Don't let me be alone." I told her I wouldn't, but death doesn't care about promises. 3 days after the funeral, I woke up to the sound of the front door opening. I live alone, or I did. I grabbed the bat from under the bed and crept down the hallway. The smell hit me first. Honeysuckle and lavender, Sarah's scent. Then her voice, "James, why is it so dark in here?" She was standing in the living room like she'd just gotten home from work. Same jeans, same flannel shirt, same slight smile, except she'd been buried in a white dress. I chose it myself. Her favorite. I didn't speak. Couldn't. I just dropped the bat. "Babe," she said again, walking closer. I saw no scars, no rot, no sign she'd been underground. She was perfect, but there was something wrong with her eyes. They looked at me like they remembered me, but couldn't quite place me. "Sarah," I finally managed to whisper. "Of course it's me," she laughed, but it sounded rehearsed. "What's wrong, James?" I lied. I told her I was just tired. I told her I missed her. I told her I loved her. And when she wrapped her arms around me, her skin was cold. That night, she climbed into bed beside me, her breathing shallow and mechanical. Every once in a while, she'd whisper my name like she was practicing it. "James, James, James," like she wasn't sure it belonged to me. I didn't sleep. Over the next few days, she acted like nothing had happened. Cooked dinner. Watched reruns of shows she loved, but she didn't eat, didn't blink, and she never left the house. I checked the cemetery. Her grave was still there, undisturbed. The caretaker swore nobody had touched it. Then I found the photo. It was on my phone, time-stamped at 3:17 a.m. 2 nights ago. A picture of me sleeping, her face barely visible in the mirror behind me, smiling, watching. I didn't take that photo. I confronted her. I had to. "Sarah," I said, holding up the phone, "what is this?" She looked at it like it was a foreign object. "Why would I take a picture of you sleeping?" "That's what I'm asking." She tilted her head, like a puppet unsure of its strings. Then she smiled. "Maybe you took it yourself. People do strange things when they're grieving." That night, I locked the bedroom door. At 2 a.m., I heard scratching. Not on the door, from inside the closet. I haven't opened that closet since. She's still here. Every day, pretending. But there are cracks. Her smile stretches too wide now. Her voice sometimes echoes, even when she's standing right next to me. She hums a lullaby we never knew, one that makes my nose bleed when she sings it too long. I think whatever came back isn't her. It wears her face, remembers her laugh, mimics her habits. But it isn't Sarah. 2 nights ago, I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the basement, standing perfectly still, staring at the boiler, whispering to it. It whispered back. I packed a bag the next day. I told her I had a business trip. She smiled and said, "Don't be gone long. I hate being alone." The exact words she said before she died, word for word. But she never knew I lied to her. The last thing I ever said to her on her deathbed was, "You'll be fine. I'll see you again." Not, "Don't let me be alone." I never said that back. So how did she remember it? I'm writing this from a motel 3 towns over. It's been 2 days. I thought I was safe until I checked the mirror this morning. There was a handprint on the glass. On the inside, she's coming, and she remembers everything. Story 4. I'm not allowed to look at the thing in my basement, no matter how much it sounds like my missing son. My son Noah vanished at 23 years of age a year ago today. I tried my best to push through it, put posters up all over town, led to search committees. Did anything else I thought might have a snowball's chance in hell helping to find him. But it all amounted to nothing. My marriage subsequently began to cave in on itself, and soon enough the family I'd spent the past 2 decades building and nurturing fell apart. My wife moved away after our separation, and I was left alone in our small house on the outskirts of town. Left alone to endlessly search under Noah's bed, inside his closet, inside the hole in his wall, hoping he would manifest out of thin air if I looked one last time. For a while, I managed to cope, to hold it together well enough to function on some level, but then the noises started. At first, it was nothing more than a faint scratching coming from below the living room couch. I would be lying there watching some god-awful TV show and nursing a beer whilst pretending to be fine, and the sound of something slowly scraping what seemed like fingernails would take me away from my distraction. The border between the living room floor and the basement ceiling wasn't very thick, so we used to hear things from down there all the time, which allowed me to remain only mildly annoyed at these badly timed scratchings. Unfortunately, the door was and always had been secured with an ancient padlock, and the landlord told us when we moved in many years prior that it was off limits. It wasn't until the whispering started that my annoyance grew into concern and soon fear. I had a stomach listening intently quite a few times to understand what was being said in that hushed, desperate tone. But I soon began to hear and later understand it in all its horrifying meaning. My face, my face, my face, between intensely dreadful curiosity and deeply penetrating terror. I resolved to ignore the landlord's order and venture into the basement. Nothing I tried could remove the padlock and now apparent reinforcement of the door, so I scoured the internet for a locksmith with experience doing more than picking old padlocks, and that same day I was able to peer into the void. A dark space devoid of any life initially greeted me, but when my eyes were able to adjust, something else came into sight. In the far corner directly below the living room couch sat a metal chair, occupied by a figure shrouded by darkness. My impaired eyesight meant I couldn't make much out, and as I was about to turn and sprint back up the stairs to call the police, the thing spoke in a hushed tone. "Dad, my face." A tremble crept across my body. "Dad." I stumbled back up the stairs and returned armed with a flashlight and a facade of assuredness. I had to know what I was dealing with. What I laid my eyes upon was something inhabiting the space between life and death. My flashlight illuminated a face made up of proportions that were all wrong. Eyes set apart too far wide. Lips extended beyond where they should be. Layers and layers of thickness where thickness shouldn't exist. It was like a cruel caricature of what a human should look like had been brought to life. As I examined the thing before me, it repeated the same phrase as before. "Dad, my face." And in that moment, standing within a breath's distance, it finally came to me. It was speaking in my son's voice, and it was indisputably his. A parent never forgets the sound of their child's voice. My heart sank to depths I'd never thought possible, and I toppled backwards out of a mix of emotions too potent for words to convey. "Noah, is that you?" I asked, my voice tinged with grief. I asked a million different questions, but always got that same reply, like a broken record somebody had manufactured that way. My bewilderment grew even more pervasive. But I couldn't stand to look at what seemed to once be my son in that state. I called the police and told them all that I'd seen, except when they arrived, all they could see was the same blackness that I'd seen at first. No chair in the corner, no figure sitting on it. They looked at me with pity. A broken man who had conjured something out of nothing more than unadulterated sadness. They gave me the information of some local resources I seemed to need before leaving. Over the next few days and weeks, I would despairingly stare into the basement, hoping to see something resembling my child. Even a vague resemblance would have been enough for me. Still, the figure remained, whispering those awful words over and over. I tried to get it out, but as soon as I laid so much as a finger on its withering skin, it, for lack of a better word, dematerialized. And as soon as I took a step back, there it was again. Just as I was coming around to the possibility that I did need help mentally and looked over the list of numbers those police officers handed me, an unassuming notebook showed up, tucked beneath my pillow with one edge poking out as if begging to be noticed. The first entry was titled Something in My Walls, and detailed a Sunday in October dated about a year and a half ago, wherein the writer described the scratching noises and whispering they were hearing coming from their bedroom wall. They scrawled the phrase they could hear at the end of the entry. My face. It was Noah's handwriting. Again, undeniably. The entries continued. He detailed how he found a hole leading into the wall cavity hidden behind a poster that he'd had up in his room since he was a little child. How he had seen a figure with badly wrong facial proportions muttering that same phrase. How he had told his parents, and they couldn't see nor hear anything in there. He wrote about how he didn't want to be carted off to some facility, that he would pretend he hadn't seen what he had, a lie, both to maintain his sanity and image. The entries ended abruptly on the 14th of June last year, the day of his disappearance. It was titled It's Here Now, and was made up of a single sentence. I've seen it, and now it wants my face. The wetness of tears forming began to cloud my vision as I closed the diary and tucked it back beneath my pillow. But out of my periphery, I noticed something scrawled on the back of the light green notebook. Please, Dad, stay out of the basement. Don't make me take yours. My son, my Noah, is still alive. Somehow, somewhere, he wants to spare me. He always was so gracious, so kind, even when he's not himself. But I can't stand knowing his fate, being able to do something about it, and letting him serve as the sacrificial lamb. I'm going down to the basement now. I only hope I can end his suffering. Story 5. I took a shortcut a gas station tenant told me about. The house in the road was just the first trap. This happened 3 nights ago. I'm a project manager for a large construction firm, and my job often involves visiting sites in the middle of nowhere. This particular job was a 5-hour haul from home, a long day of reviewing plans and dealing with contractors that stretched well into the evening. By the time I finally packed my tools and laptop into my truck, it was past 8 p.m. The sky was a deep, starless purple, and I was exhausted. Not just tired, but that deep-in-your-bones weariness where your thoughts feel slow and syrupy, and all you can focus on is a singular goal of getting home. Home to my wife, to my own bed. Home to check on our 2 kids, sleeping soundly and safely. The first few hours of the drive were a hypnotic blur of asphalt and high beams. I listened to podcasts without really hearing the words, my mind already at home, picturing the familiar comfort of my front door. Sometime around 11:30 p.m., the fuel light on my dashboard blinked on, pulling me from my reverie. I spotted a sign for a 24-hour gas station a few miles ahead and pulled off the main highway into one of those lonely oases of fluorescent light that seemed to exist only for desperate late-night travelers. The air outside was cool and crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. Inside, the station was sterile and silent, save for the low hum of the drink coolers. I grabbed a bitter, burnt-tasting coffee and a bag of beef jerky, hoping the caffeine and salt would be enough to get me to the last leg of the journey. The kid behind the counter looked like he'd been grown in that very store. He was young, maybe 19, with lank, dark hair falling into his eyes and an aura of profound, soul-crushing boredom. I tried to be friendly as he scanned my items. "Long night," I said with a nod toward the oppressive darkness outside the windows. He offered a non-committal grunt in reply. "Hey," I said, pulling out my phone and looking at the map app. "My GPS is telling me I've still got close to 2 hours left. You know this area, right? Is there any kind of shortcut? Anything to shave some time off?" For the first time since I had walked in, he showed a spark of life. He looked up from the counter, his bored eyes focusing on me. "You're headed east on the main highway?" "Yeah, toward the city." He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially, as if he were about to divulge a state secret. "All right, check it out. In about 10-15 miles, the highway's gonna fork. Big time. The main route curves hard to the right. The sign is massive, lit up like a Christmas tree. You can't miss it. But there's a smaller road that goes straight, splits off to the left. It's an old service road, not really on the maps anymore." He tapped a long, pale finger on the Formica countertop. "It cuts right through the state forest, instead of winding all the way around it. It's a little rough, you know, but it's straight as an arrow. It'll spit you back out on the west side of the suburbs. Probably saves you a good 40-45 minutes." My tired brain lit up at the prospect. 45 minutes meant being home before 1 a.m. It meant a few precious extra moments of sleep before the kids woke me up at dawn. "Is it safe to drive?" I asked, the last bastion of my common sense putting up a token fight. He shrugged, the veil of boredom descending over him once more. "It's a road, paved and everything. Just, watch out for deer. People use it. People use it." That was all the reassurance I needed. "Thanks, man. Seriously, I appreciate it." I paid for my stuff, got back into the humming warmth of my truck, and pulled back onto the highway. The coffee was already working its magic, and the promise of an earlier arrival had injected me with a fresh dose of determination. True to the kid's word, about 15 minutes later, the junction appeared. A huge, reflective green sign pointed right, guiding the flow of traffic onto a familiar, well-lit highway. And to the left, there was a narrow, dark strip of asphalt that seemed to be swallowed by a solid wall of trees just a few yards in. No lights, no signs, just an open mouth leading into pure, unadulterated blackness. Every sensible instinct I possessed was screaming at me to stay on the highway, to stick with the known. But the exhausted, impatient man who just wanted to be home won the argument. With a flick of a turn signal that no one else would see, I turned my truck off the beaten path and into the throat of the forest. The change was instantaneous and deeply unsettling. The smooth, rhythmic hum of the highway vanished, replaced by the jarring, gravelly crunch of my tires on old, cracked pavement. The wide, open sky was gone, blotted out by a suffocating canopy of ancient trees whose branches knitted together overhead, blocking the moon and stars. My high beams could only penetrate so far, carving a narrow, shifting tunnel through a darkness, so complete it felt physical, like swimming through ink. The silence, too, was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, expectant. For the first half hour, it was just me and the road. It twisted and turned more than the kid had let on, and I had to slow down for potholes that were deep enough to swallow a small animal. I didn't see any deer. I didn't see any other cars. I didn't see a single sign of human existence. The unease that had been a small spider on my spine was now a monstrous tarantula, its hairy legs crawling all over my skin. This felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. The kid at the gas station, he'd made it sound like a local secret, not a forgotten path to nowhere. I glanced at my phone. No signal. Of course. I told myself to just push through. Turning back now would be an admission of a stupid mistake, and would add at least an hour to my drive. It had to lead somewhere. It was a road, after all. I must have been on it for the better part of an hour when I rounded a particularly sharp, blind curve, and my world came to a screeching, rubber-burning halt. My foot slammed the brake pedal to floor. The truck fishtailed slightly, the anti-lock brake stuttering violently. The acrid smell of hot rubber filled the cab as I stared. my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, blocking the road. From the overgrown ditch on the left of the crumbling shoulder on the right was a house. I just sat there, my mind refusing to compute the data my eyes were feeding it. It wasn't an old, dilapidated shack. It wasn't a ruin. It was a house. A perfectly normal, if slightly dated, single-story ranch house with pale yellow siding and white shutters. It was the kind of house you see in any quiet, middle-class suburb in the country. It looked like it had been surgically extracted from a peaceful neighborhood and dropped with malicious intent in the middle of this godforsaken road. My first coherent thought was a simple, profane what the fuck. My second was that I had finally broken. The exhaustion had won. I'd fallen asleep at the wheel, and this was a bizarre, vivid stress dream. I reached over and pinched the back of my hand, twisting the skin until a sharp, undeniable bolt of pain shot at my arm. I was awake. I was horrifyingly, impossibly awake. My headlights painted the scene in a sterile, hyper-realistic light. The windows were dark, glassy voids. There was no driveway, no mailbox, no garden. The lawn was just the road itself. A small, concrete porch with a single step led to the front door. And the front door was open, not ajar, not cracked. It was swung wide open, revealing a perfect, featureless rectangle of absolute blackness. It wasn't an oversight. It was an invitation. An invitation into the suffocating darkness within. The predatory silence of the forest seemed to emanate from that doorway, a palpable vacuum of sound. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. This was wrong on a level I didn't have words for. My flight or fight response was screaming flight. The plan was simple. Reverse. Turn this beast of a truck around and get the hell out. I didn't care how long it took. I shifted the truck into reverse. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement in the black rectangle of the doorway. A figure was emerging. At first, it was just a silhouette against the deeper black within. Then it took a step forward, moving out of the shadows and into the full, unforgiving glare of my high beams. My blood turned to ice. My breath hitched in my chest. My hand fell from the gear shift. It was my wife. It was her. The same height. The same way her brown hair fell across her shoulders. The same slight tilt of her head. She was even wearing the soft blue dress she favored on warm summer evenings. The one with the little embroidered flowers on the collar. I was frozen, pinned in my seat by a spear of pure, unadulterated terror. My brain was a screaming chaos of denial. It was impossible. She was at home, 2 hours away. She was in our bed, in our house, in our town. This thing in front of me was a paradox, a walking, breathing violation of all known laws of the universe. The thing that looked like my wife stood on the single concrete step and smiled. It was her smile, the one that could make my day better in an instant. It was warm, it was loving, it was perfect. She raised a hand and gave a small, familiar wave. "Honey," her voice called out. The sound was flawless, a perfect recording of her gentle tone, yet echoed strangely in the dead air of the forest, like a sound clip played in a soundproof room. Every cell in my body was screaming. This was a nightmare. This was a trap. The wife thing's smile widened a fraction. It took another step, leaving the porch and planting its feet on the cracked asphalt of the road. "Come on, dear," it said, its voice laced with a playful, chiding affection that made my stomach churn. We were getting worried. "You're late. The word hit me like a physical blow. "The kids are already in their rooms," the creature continued, gesturing with its head back toward the dark, silent house. "They kept asking when their daddy was coming home." The words were a precision strike, aimed directly at my heart. But instead of luring me in, they ignited a spark of rage deep within my terror. It was a confirmation of the calculated, predatory nature of this performance. It knew I had a wife. It knew I had children. It knew what to say. How could it know? The kid at the gas station? Did I mention my family? I couldn't remember. My thoughts were a blizzard of panic. I had to leave. I had to leave now. My hand, shaking so badly I could barely control it, fumbled for the gear shift. And then a light flickered on in the window to the right of the open door. A soft, warm yellow glow, like a bedside lamp. and in the square of light, two small shadows appeared. Silhouettes, one taller, one a little shorter. The unmistakable shapes of two children, standing side by side, perfectly still, looking out. My children. A choked sob tore itself from my throat. This was a diabolical puppet show, and I was the sole member of the audience. The sight of those little shadows, so innocent and yet so profoundly wrong in this place, shattered the last of my paralysis. This wasn't just about my own fear anymore. This was a desecration. This thing was wearing the faces of my family, using my love for them as bait on a hook. Adrenaline and a pure, protective fury surged through me, a white-hot fire that cauterized my fear. I slammed the truck into reverse, my foot stomping the accelerator to the floor. The tires screamed in protest, kicking up a shower of gravel as the truck shot backward. I wrenched the steering wheel, executing a frantic, clumsy turn on the narrow road. All the while, the thing that looked like my wife just stood there, its placid, loving smile never faltering. The moment the back of my truck was facing the house, the moment my headlights swung away from the scene, it happened. A light erupted from the house. It wasn't a soft, yellow lamplight. This was a silent, concussive blast of pure, clinical white light. It poured from the open door, from every window, a brilliance so intense it was like a sun had been born and died in that small, fake house. It bleached the entire forest in a sterile, shadowless glare, turning midnight into a horrifying, artificial noon. The world was stark black trees against blinding, soul-searing white. I couldn't help myself. I risked a single glance in my rear-view mirror. I had to see the truth. The thing standing on the road was not my wife. The light illuminated its true form. The smile was still there, but was a rictus of fury, stretched impossibly wide across a face that was melting and reforming. Its jaw was unhinged, dropping down to its chest to reveal a maw filled with rows of needle-thin teeth. Its eyes, once the warm, familiar brown of my wife's, were now just bottomless black pits radiating a hate so profound it felt like a physical force. It was a mask of pure malevolence, enraged its prey was escaping its carefully set trap. I floored it. The engine roared as I tore down that dark road, fleeing the impossible light and the abomination it had revealed. I didn't look back again. I just watched the terrifying white glow shrink in my mirrors, consumed by the trees and the night, until it was gone. I drove like a man possessed for what felt like an hour, but my clock insisted was only about 30 minutes. My knuckles were white, my shirt was soaked in cold sweat. Then, through the trees, I saw the comforting glow of electric light. The gas station. Relief washed over me, so potent it nearly made me vomit. I'd made it back. I was safe. I pulled into the gravel lot. The crunch of the tires a welcome, normal sound. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence was absolute. But something was wrong. As I sat there, gasping for air, trying to slow my runaway heart, I realized two things. First, I hadn't passed a junction. The fork in the road where I turned off was nowhere to be seen. I should have reached it before the station. Second, the gas station was deserted, utterly empty. No other cars, no trucks at the pumps. Just my truck, the humming coolers, and the glaring lights. I peered through the large plate glass window of the store. I could see the kid behind the counter. The same one. Same lank hair. Same bored posture. But he was still. Too still. He was looking down at the counter, frozen in place like a mannequin. I got out of my truck, leaving the door ajar, and just watched him. The seconds ticked by. He didn't move a single muscle. Not a breath. Not a shift of his weight. A new dread, a more subtle and terrifying dread, began to creep in. This wasn't the end of the trap. This was part two. As if it knew I was watching, it moved. Its head lifted. It didn't lift like a person's. It pivoted on its neck with a slow, unnervingly smooth mechanical motion. There was no humanity in it. Its face turned to look directly at me through the glass, and it smiled. It was the single most horrifying expression I have ever witnessed. It was not a human smile. It was a grotesque facsimile, a wide, predatory stretching of the lips to reveal teeth that were too white, too uniform, too sharp. The eyes above the smile were black, vacant pools, reflecting the fluorescent lights with dead, soulless sheen. It was the same fundamental wrongness, the same intelligent malevolence I had seen in the face in my rearview mirror. They knew I would run, and they knew where I would run to. The house was the crude lure. The gas station, a place of safety and relief, was the real trap. I didn't think. I scrambled back into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and cranked the engine. I tore out of that fake, dead gas station, leaving the smiling thing to its silent vigil in its glass box. I just drove, my mind a blank slate of terror. I was back on the same dark, endless road, heading away from the Mimic station, completely lost in a nightmare that seemed to have no exit. Another half an hour of panicked driving, my fuel light now blinking with genuine urgency. And then I saw it, the junction, the massive green sign for the main highway, and beyond it, a river of red and white lights from other cars, real people. Just before the junction sat the gas station, but this one was alive. A semi-truck was at the pumps, its diesel engine rumbling. A family was piling out of a minivan. The light felt different, warmer. It felt real. I pulled in, my body shaking so violently I could barely put the truck in park. I stumbled into the store, a ghost in my own skin. The kid behind the counter had dark hair, but his face was rounder, his eyes tired but human. He was watching something on his phone. He looked up as I staggered to the counter. "Whoa, dude," he said, his eyes widening at the sight of me. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." My voice was a dry, cracking whisper. The shortcut, the road, the left fork. He gave me a confused look. "What shortcut? The left fork? Man, that road's been closed for over a decade. The bridge washed out in a flood. It's a dead end, doesn't go anywhere." I just stared at him, his words echoing in the vast, empty space where my sanity used to be. "But you told me it's safe to drive, and people use it. I was just on it. There was a house." He leaned on me and whispered, his expression shifting to one of wary concern. "Are you sure it was me who told you that? And let's be clear here, a house? In the middle of the road? Buddy, you need to pull over and get some sleep. You're seeing things. Seriously, grab another coffee and just stick to the main highway. It's the only way through." I nodded numbly, paid for a coffee I never drank, and left. I took the long way home. That last hour on a busy, well-lit highway was the most beautiful and comforting drive of my entire life. I got home just before 4 a.m. I slipped inside my real house. I checked on my real children, sleeping soundly in their beds, their small chests rising and falling peacefully. I crawled into bed next to my wife, my real, warm, breathing wife, and I lay there in the dark, shaking until the sun came up. So this is my warning. I don't know what those things are, but they're out there, and they're getting smarter. They built a lure for me out of a house in my family. And when that failed, they had a second, more clever lure ready and waiting, a place of refuge. They are mimics. They learn. They use our deepest desires, the desire to get home, the desire for safety, against us. So if you're ever driving late at night and you're tired, and someone offers you a shortcut that sounds too good to be true, it is. Stay on the main road. Stay in the light. Because the things that live in the dark know exactly what you want to see, and they're more than happy to build it for you. Story 6. My best friend has been on death row for the past 12 years. Soon I have to watch him die. I've known Johnny almost all my life. Him and I have been buddies since middle school, due to our mutual interest in computers and all things technology. We lived a pretty good childhood together, and I think it's safe to say that it was because of him I'm able to look back at that time with a smile. Even today, I can still vividly remember those days. It was 7th grade after school. The year was still just beginning, and there were many new kids I hadn't met yet. Johnny was one of them. I was in the library waiting for my parents to pick me up when I spotted him sitting alone at one of the tables behind a bookshelf. In front of him were many different parts of a PC waiting to be assembled. He picked up a screwdriver and was about to start screwing one components on the PC tower, but stopped when he saw me approaching him. "Building computer?" I asked. He slightly smiled. "Yeah, I'm in the after-school STEM club. Mr. Mosley is helping me put this together," he explained. From there we talked, with me starting the conversation by informing him that I've also been building PCs since I was in 5th grade. After some time, I even joined him in building his PC until my parents showed up. I asked my mom to enroll me in the after-school STEM club as soon as I got in the car. A few days later, I returned the permission slip, and I was in. I walked in the middle of the session on my first day. Johnny turned and spotted me right away. We exchanged smiles and I took a seat right next to him. Soon Johnny and I started hanging out regularly, meeting after school, visiting each other's houses, and blowing hours away playing video games. As Johnny was a major PC gamer, we had officially become friends. The first time I visited Johnny's house was when I discovered he had a younger sister who was only a year younger than we were. Her name is Elaine. Elaine also attended the same middle school we did. "Johnny, there's a cutie at the door," she yelled back in the house, grinning as she walked away. During high school, we took our shared interest a bit further by participating in hackathons, high school internships, and early college programs. Johnny and I joined forces and managed to win first place at one of the hackathons during our senior year. This resulted in us winning some pretty hefty scholarships for our years in college, where I went on to major in information technology, and Johnny went on to major in computer science. We were both very intentional about what university to go to, making sure that we spent our college years together by attending the same one. Halfway through college, after completing countless internships and projects on the side, we eventually came up with the idea of starting our own business. So after graduating and moving back home, we opened a small computer repair shop. Even though we primarily did repairs, custom PC building, general tech support, software installation, and other services along those lines were also typical. After the grand opening, we thought our store was on the path to failing, as we seldom got any business during the first month. But to our surprise, we started to gain a lot of traction within a short period of time over the month that followed. Word got around that we did some really nice work, and we had top-tier customer service. Soon we couldn't get enough customers. There were so many people coming in with so many invoices to fulfill that Johnny and I often stayed hours after closing time to keep up. After some time of exhausting ourselves to death doing this, we figured we were earning enough money to hire at least 2 other people. Our first hires turned out to be 2 graduates fresh out of college. Just like us, over time we continued to give the business all we had, maximizing profits and stacking up cash. Almost everything continued to go well. That was until Johnny and I started to get less agreeable with each other when it came to making decisions about the business. At some point, there was more conflict between the 2 of us. We couldn't agree on anything, and it made our attempt at conducting business relatively difficult. I remember this starting with one instance in particular. We had just got a call from a customer who wanted to sell an old PlayStation 2 to us. Soon as I get off the phone, I turn around and see Johnny glaring at me with his arms folded. "You know, I've been thinking about this whole thing of collecting consoles no one buys anymore," he said. He argued that taking in old pieces of technology was of no benefit, and it would be better for our business if we cut that as a service. "What do you mean? We still get a few collectors who are all over stuff like this." I objected. "Exactly, every now and then. It's a waste to keep putting money and resources into refurbishing things we rarely sell." After some friendly exchange, I still stood my ground, insisting that we continue to service and sell older gen consoles and pieces of technology. But it was far from over. Small disputes such as this one started to riddle our days in the store, and the more they occurred, the more intense they became. The arguments strayed away from simple disagreements to intense verbal matches. Our employees even noticed that the interactions between us were growing more aggressive by the day. It got to a point where Johnny and I were straight up shouting at each other. During one instance, we got in each other's face, shy of a physical fight. A few of our employees got in the mix and separated us. "Come on, man, chill," one of them muttered. helping create distance between Johnny and I. Outside of our time spent at the store, Johnny and I were slowly parting. He stopped calling me. We were no longer hanging out like we used to. But despite the sudden separation from my lifelong friend, I still managed to fill that void at the time. I started spending time with Elaine. Behind Johnny's back, I would visit Elaine's house and sometimes take her out, often going to movies and late-night diners. During our times together, she often complained about her brother. Apparently, Johnny's declining attitude wasn't something he only displayed at work. He was also more short-tempered and grumpy around his family. Their parents even contacted Elaine asking her if she knew what was up with Johnny, as they noticed he just didn't seem too happy when visiting their house. As of lately, he often called Elaine in a bad mood, already shouting as soon as she answered the phone. Most of the time he was accusing her of seeing me behind his back, which she was, but Elaine figured it shouldn't have been any of his concern at that point. Who the hell is he to call my phone talking to me like that? She snarled. Just because he wants to stop talking to you doesn't mean I have to. It always grinded Johnny's gears seeing Elaine and I getting close and enjoying each other's company. Upon first meeting her in middle school, Johnny walked in on us talking and laughing in his room. "Get out," Johnny sternly told Elaine, pointing to the bedroom door. She scolded Johnny, then waved at me with a smile before exiting the room. That was actually the first time I've seen him mad. Elaine and I could never talk for more than 5 minutes without Johnny growing suspicious of whatever and eventually getting in the mix. Whenever either of us tried to object to Johnny's controlling behavior, he threatened to alert his mother or father and tell them what was going on. Johnny almost threw a fit in high school when he found out Elaine and I plan on going prom together. Find someone else. "Keep your hands off my sister," he said. Unfortunately, that's exactly what I ended up doing. Elaine and I canceled our plans of going prom together, and I indeed found someone else to take. To this day, I still have regrets about allowing him to talk me out of what could have turned out to be a potentially great memory. Elaine and I wouldn't have been able to spend time together the way we were doing if Johnny and I were still keeping in touch. He would have bickered at me every time we met. Every single time. Even after we cut ties, he still called Elaine's phone too much while we were out, constantly interfering with us. Elaine tried to ignore his calls, but he repeatedly dialed her phone. She always ended up answering, scolding him for his ridiculous antics. He was shouting so loudly I could hear him through the phone speaker. "Don't lie to me. I know you're with him," he said. Eventually, she ended up turning off her phone because of him. After all that started happening, I couldn't stand the idea of working with him at the shop on days that followed. But he spent a lot of time in the office anyway, and avoiding too much interaction with him became relatively easy on most days. However, when we did communicate, I could still sense a negative energy, and every time our eyes met, I could just feel him saying, "I know you're seeing my sister, you asshole." A few months later, the holidays arrived, and Christmas was only a few days away, so we closed the shop down for a week. Elaine urged me to visit their family, as they were planning on having to get together. Their grandparents from out of town planned on visiting their parents' house for a week. I declined Elaine's invitation. Johnny and I still weren't on the best terms, and I was aware he'd be there. I didn't want to be part of the reason why their Christmas was tainted. A couple days after Christmas, Elaine informed me that all went well, and everyone had a good time over the holidays, even though Johnny tried to quietly sneak in some questions involving me and Elaine's relationship. She still hadn't spilled the beans and told him that we were actually seeing each other, although he suspected it. The suspense of not knowing 100% was eating him alive. I was awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of my phone ringing. Upon answering it, the sound of Johnny's distraught voice on the other end shot me awake. He was shouting and screaming so heavily that I could barely make out what he was saying. This time he wasn't shouting out of anger. It was out of fear. When I got him to settle down a bit, he was more understandable. "Dennis, man," he sobbed. I don't can." I sat up in bed, quickly. "Johnny, what's wrong?" There was some brief silence. Then he started bawling uncontrollably. "Everyone is dead," he said. "What?" I shouted. "Everyone is dead," he repeated. "Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa." His constant crying kept him from completing a full sentence. "Someone's hurt. Did you call the police?" I asked. More crying. I simply hung up the phone, hopping out of bed and slipping on anything I could find. My jaws dropped when I pulled up to Johnny's parents' house and saw multiple police cruisers along with a few ambulance trucks parked in the yard. The flashing lights lit the area up, adding to the already heavily lit neighborhood from the Christmas lights. There were many officers and paramedics walking in and out of the front door of the house. I hastily parked my car and hopped out when I saw two of the paramedics exit the house pushing body bags on stretchers. Two of the officers stopped me before I could get halfway across the yard. "What happened?" "My friend lives here," I said, trying to break free from the gasp of one of the officers. "Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down," one of them replied. At that moment, another car came pulling up to the scene. It came to an abrupt stop in the middle of the street. Then that's when I saw Elaine hopping out of the passenger side before dashing toward the house. She too was restrained by one of the officers and held back from seeing what was inside. She argued and screamed at the officer, begging him to let her in the house. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't let you do that. My parents and grandparents are in there." "What the hell happened?" Elaine screamed. The officer was hesitant to answer, letting Elaine know that she was advised to brace herself. Elaine broke down and started crying, barely able to stand up. She held on to the officer's uniform to keep from falling to the ground. I pointed at Elaine and asked the officers holding on to me if I could go over to her. They released their grip and watched as I ran to Elaine, right away helping her get to her feet and embracing her. She sobbed into my chest while saying, "What happened, Dennis?" I wasn't sure myself, but I got the biggest hint when I saw Johnny coming out of the door. His arms were handcuffed behind his back as another officer walked him out. As he got closer, it took a moment for me to see the blood smearing his face. His shirt was also stained red. When Elaine turned and saw Johnny coming out of the house, the officer had to stop her again as she flew out of my arms and tried to run towards him. Elaine asked me to stay at her place that night. She was in no position to be alone. She had a hard time sleeping. Both of us did. Elaine stayed up half the night, sobbing at my side. I kept my arms wrapped around her for hours, sitting up in her dark bedroom. I don't think I could ever talk to him again. I hate that guy. Elaine cried. My heart dropped when she said this. Never heard her talk that way about him. She said hates him, then referred to him as that guy as if he was some distant stranger. But he did what most would think only a distant stranger is capable of. Only a distant stranger will be capable of going into your parents' bedroom and stabbing them to death. Only a distant stranger would creep up behind your grandmother in her rocking chair and impale her through the neck. Only a distant stranger would beat your grandfather to death with a hammer in the bathtub. Unfortunately, it wasn't a distant stranger that committed these deeds. It was her own brother. But Johnny swore he was innocent. According to him, someone broke in and knocked him out. Then he woke up and found the mess. After the case had found its way on the televisions of thousands in our city, going to work and running the shop became even more awkward than when Johnny was around. Every customer that came in looked at me strangely, silently judging. I already knew what they were thinking. My employees showed so much compassion and were very sensitive about the matter. Some of them were even open to talk if I ever needed to let any emotions out. I take running my business very seriously, and I'm typically active out on the floor assisting my employees with customers. But for that first month, I locked myself in my office on many days, thinking about Johnny and what he did. My mind overanalyzed everything. I thought back into our childhood and tried to mentally catch any warning signs I may have missed at the time. Yes, even back then I noticed Johnny was a bit demanding and controlling, but nothing pointed to him being a potential mass murderer. On the news, they said there was no clear motive. But Elaine's theory was that Johnny was so angry and fed up with us seeing each other that he decided to take it out on his own family. If I was home, he probably would have killed me too. Elaine said, Elaine and I both have been ignoring his calls from jail since he was first taken into custody. As soon as we heard the automated voice on the other end, we hung up. That was until my curiosity got the best of me, and I couldn't help but to stay on the line. The next time the automated voice asked if I'd accept a call from an inmate. Yes, I said in a low voice. I felt chills when I heard Johnny's voice for the first time after 2 months. Dennis, there was a short pause. How's it going, man? I said. He started out by asking how Elaine and I had been doing. Then he asked how everyone at the shop was handling the news. I ignored his question about the shop and told him he didn't want to know how Elaine was feeling. I heard a slight gasp on the other end. He went on to explain how his time behind bars was going. Due to the media attention, Johnny was placed in protective custody. He, of course, wasn't allowed to interact with other inmates in the general population. At first, he thought this was fortunate, considering the high profile of his case. But after a few weeks of almost complete isolation and deprivation of human interaction, he was wishing they'd just mix him with the others, according to him, other than Elaine and I. He tried to call other family members and friends, but they all ignored him just as we did. This was no surprise to us, as Elaine got several calls from more distant family members informing her that Johnny was hitting them up nonstop. Many of them also called wanting to know what the hell happened. He was surprisingly calm as he told me these things. However, he still sounded like he was everything I figured, depressed and agitated. I was starting to feel bad for him. Everyone in his life was turning their backs on him. I mean, yeah, it was his fault at the end of the day. But I've known Johnny almost all my life, and he was my best friend. His calm facade came crashing down abruptly, and he suddenly started sobbing. It wasn't me. You haven't believed me, man, he cried. I paused before saying, Johnny, you were the only one alive in the house when the cops came. You were covered in blood, and your fingerprints were all over the place. You even confessed, Ash. I confessed only because they kept pressuring me in the interrogation room. He interrupted. I sighed. So what are you saying? He told that story again of an intruder breaking in and knocking him unconscious. I rolled my eyes. Then I stayed silent as he retold the story, this time in more detail. I brought some of my equipment over to my parents' house because I planned on working on a PC in the garage. At around 10 o'clock that night, Elaine left with her friends. Then I gathered my equipment. I put my headphones on and worked on my PC for about an hour before heading back in. He started. I tapped my foot silently, desperately wanting it to end. But the second I took my headphones off and peered around the house, he trailed off into a slight whimper. I saw Grandma in a rocking chair, and at first I thought she was asleep. That was until I walked in front of her and saw a knife sticking out her throat. I knew it was done recently, because as soon as I stepped in front of her, she coughed. She was somehow still alive, desperately holding on to every breath she could possibly take. I panicked, then tripped and fell right on top of her, further driving the blade deeper into her neck. He kept sobbing. I got up and ran into my parents' room screaming to let them know what happened. But by the time I got there, Dad was already trying to crawl his way out of the room. As he silently reached out for me, I quickly realized his throat was slit wide open. I dropped down and tried the best I could to help him control the bleeding. Then I looked up and saw a bloody bulge beneath the sheets in the bed. There was another long pause. All there was on the other end was the sounds of Johnny sniffling and failing to suppress his cries. He really was putting on a good performance. I looked all over the house for Grandpa next. I found him in the bathroom, half floating in bloody bath water. It was then I tried to run out of the house while whipping out my cell phone, but I discovered someone else trying to beat me to it. He was sliding the living room door open, shy of stepping outside. He had on a ski mask and white shades to cover his eyes. I was pissed as soon as I laid eyes on the son of a bitch. So pissed that I charged at him before he could get away. I tackled him to the ground, causing his white sunglasses to topple off his face. We tussled for minutes, and to be honest, he was kicking my ass. While I was on the floor, he went and put his glasses on again, then came back and kicked me in the face. It was the last thing I remember before I found myself waking up to the sound of the police banging on the door outside. What did the cops have to say about your story? Did you tell them this? I asked. Yes, but for some reason the evidence at the scene doesn't match what I'm saying. They even saw me all bruised and fucked up from the fight, but they still aren't buying it. Please, man, you have to believe I'd never do this. Well, there's still time to dash. The sound of someone knocking on my door outside caused me to stop. I peeped out and saw Elaine standing in front of my door. I told Dennis I'd have to talk to him later before hanging up the phone mid one of his sentences. I let Elaine in and greeted her with a hug. Not bothering to tell her, I finally spoke to her brother. Johnny continued to call for weeks going forward. At the time, we spoke around twice a week on average. I'm not going to lie. At first, I was kind of annoyed when he called. But after reluctantly pulling myself to say yes to the automated voice on the other end just a few times, I was doing it automatically every time he dialed. I couldn't bring myself to ignore him completely anymore. The more we spoke, I could sense his declining mental state after every call. He was always crying, apologizing, begging. He went on about how he misses family and friends, including Elaine and I. He wanted to run the shop with me again. He wanted to continue our journey. He wanted to be friends again. But unfortunately, I barely considered him a friend anymore. During one call, he begged me to put him on the phone with Elaine. When I told him, she said she never wanted to speak to him again. He downright screamed into the phone saying that he loved her. He apologized like his life depended on it. For a while I didn't bother telling Elaine that I was accepting Johnny's calls. But when she finally found out, she was surprisingly calm about it. Although she didn't want to speak to Johnny, she always asked to be called and wondered what we were talking about. She was aware of the story Johnny continued to tell about the intruder that allegedly broke in. Just like me, she was aware that this dude was clearly lying. I must say, he told that tale well. I was surprised at how descriptive and detailed he was about it. He also did a great job of sticking to that lie and remembering everything each and every time he told it, other than his cries and sudden love for all his family. Hearing about the ski-masked intruder with white shades was routine. I wish I had shattered those glasses right in that bastard's face, he yelled over the phone. I found it amazing how far he was willing to go to deny doing something he knew he did. Elaine thought maybe he really was secretly going crazy the whole time, and this imaginary burglar with white shades was just a manifestation of his guilt. More months passed by, and the tension between us barely cooled down. We were still super pissed with Johnny, and Elaine still hadn't spoken to him a single time yet. But I felt we should have at least given him one visit while he was locked up. After speaking with him off and on the phone and hearing how distressed he was, I wanted to see how much this was impacting him physically. Elaine looked at me like I was a ghost when I suggested we go to visit him. There was lots of resistance, and of course a small fit at first, but she was eventually swayed and agreed to visit Johnny with me at the county jail. All right then, I'll go to see my piece of shit brother once. On the day we went, Elaine pouted the whole ride there. I just knew she had some things to say to Johnny. When we got to the county jail and stepped out of the car, she suddenly became eager. She angrily stomped her way to the entrance, reaching the building seconds before I did. Johnny didn't physically express his excitement to finally see us. As the guard walked him to the phone, he approached the security glass with a tense, very worried expression. But as he got closer to us, he seemed to quickly ease up. I picked up the phone beside me and waited for Johnny to do the same. "It's nice to finally see you guys," he said, trying to crack a very slight smile. I peered over at Elaine. She wasn't smiling at all. She was glaring at him angrily. Johnny noticed, which is why he didn't bother saying hi to her yet. "It's nice to see you too." I lied. His physical appearance was unfortunately starting to match his mental state. He looked like he was having a hard time sleeping, as there were darkened bags beneath his eyes. His hair was a mess. As expected, he didn't look happy. The conversation started with Johnny doing his usual emotional pandering, constantly talking about how much he missed us, how much he loved us, and how he wished he appreciated having us around before. Everything he's already expressed numerous times over phone. As we spoke, Elaine remained seated, her arms crossed, still glaring at Johnny through the security glass. Things went relatively smooth until he mentioned the intruder with the white glasses again. Elaine rolled her eyes and snatched the phone out of my hand mid-conversation. "You know what, John? You're full of shit, and you know it." Elaine yelled into the phone. This caught the attention of everyone in the visitation area. Johnny's expression grew even more dreadful than what it already was. Do you have any idea what I go through at night? I can't shut my eyes without being reminded that my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my family, our family, are all gone because of you. Johnny stared back at her in disbelief, his eyes filling with tears. You took my life from me. You took everything. And now you're trying to put the blame on some imaginary villain, when the villain is you. Elaine continued to vent, her voice growing louder the longer she went on. Johnny didn't say anything back. I could tell he was about to break down any minute. A guard approached her and warned her about her behavior. When she ignored him, she was hauled out of the building. I picked up the phone again. Johnny's face scrunched up, then he finally released that breakdown I was anticipating. My lawyer said they might give me death, Dennis, he sobbed. I'm scared as hell. One of the guards on the other side came to let Johnny know his time was up. He placed the phone back on the hook and sobbed as he was led to the door behind him. With the phone still to my ear, I watched it with a face that expressed shock, confusion, and dread all at the same time. About a week later, Lane and I were on the sofa watching the news at my place. She had her arms wrapped around me, head resting on my chest. When the reporter began talking about Johnny's case, I felt her body instantly start to shake. A picture of Johnny appeared on the screen beside the reporter. Then that's when the reporter announced that Johnny did indeed get sentenced to death by lethal injection. Elaine's grip on me grew tight. Then she turned her head away from the screen, starting to cry. "No," she whimpered. I rubbed her head and kissed her, doing my best to console her. Apparently, Johnny was scheduled to be sent to a death row unit at a prison 45 minutes away within a week. I thought about giving one last visit before he was shipped off, but I decided I'd had enough for the time being. I turned to a different channel and embraced Elaine even more, muffling every last one of her cries until she eventually fell asleep in my arms. 12 years later, my business has grown into something I never imagined. At this point, not only is the shop thriving 10 times more than what it once was when we first opened it, but I have multiple shops open in multiple cities now. What I earn monthly is double what the average person earns in a year. I couldn't ask for more. I can't deny the fact that the media attention around Johnny's case at the time boosted our clientele. Lots of people in our hometown knew Johnny used to run the shop with me. Constantly seeing his face on television had people talking, and as a result, more people became aware that our business existed. 2 years after Johnny was shipped away, Elaine and I got married, then we moved 2 hours away from our hometown. We found a nice neighborhood in which there was a 2-story house that had the both of us infatuated. The house we live in now is just immaculate. Even to this day, I still can't help but to be impressed with myself every time I step back and look at it. Elaine quit her career and decided to help me manage my businesses full-time. But as of now, she's been playing it cool, resting since we're expecting our first child now. She's been pregnant for about 6 months. So I'm getting closer to finally seeing my daughter come into the world. Over the years, we've still been keeping in touch with Johnny off and on. Elaine was still very selective about when she wanted to interact with him. When she did, she wasn't happy, nor did she express the anger I knew was still there. She's gotten better at controlling herself when talking to Johnny. She spoke to Johnny for the sake of being kind to the only brother she ever had, although she still hated him deep down. We rarely went to visit him, as he was too far away and we were often busy running our businesses. When Johnny found out he had a niece on the way, we was thrilled and heartbroken at the same time. It was nice that he was going to be an uncle, but he'd never get a chance to spend any time with her or get to know her. My niece is going to grow up thinking her uncle murdered her grandparents and great-grandparents, he quietly whispered months ago. Yes, he was still denying what he's done, all those years later. I also still had to hear him blame it on this mystery intruder with the ski mask and white glasses. The fucker will hear about my death from the safety of his comfortable life, he once said. He knew better than to mention this intruder while talking to Elaine. Otherwise, he risked being hung up on, and he didn't have the privilege to call back as a death row inmate. He had to use his phone calls wisely. Unfortunately for Johnny, he wouldn't be making much more phone calls anyway. They scheduled his execution date, and it was much closer than what I expected. He was scheduled to die a month before the expected date of my daughter's birth. It had been years since Elaine showed any intense emotion over this. But when I gave her the news of Johnny's execution date being finalized, she cried again for the first time. Although she felt like she hated her brother, she ironically didn't want him to die. Despite this, she agreed to go visit the prison on the day of his execution when I made the suggestion. Even after all this, we figured the least we could do was be present during my former friend's and her only brother's final moments on Earth. The day of Johnny's execution didn't start out too well. Upon first waking up, I looked over and saw Elaine already slouched on the edge of the bed. Her head hung low, staring at the floor. I slid over and hugged her from behind, asking her what she was doing up so early, as it was only 6:30 in the morning. She didn't answer. She just sighed and walked out of the room. I heard the TV in the living room come on soon afterwards. Elaine didn't get much of any sleep at all throughout the night. I myself woke up twice and heard her wander in the house doing God knows what. She was fidgety all morning, constantly shaking during every task. I even heard some more silent cries come out of her, although she did her best to conceal them. I already knew what the deal was. There was no point in trying to sit down and ask about it. Anyone who knew that they were about to witness their brother die soon wouldn't be too easygoing. Later that day, Elaine and I arrived at the prison Johnny was being held at. Upon arrival, a guard led us to the execution chamber. He opened the door with a friendly smile and directed us to walk in. There were already several people seated preparing to witness the execution. We saw a few familiar faces, which included some of my day one employees who still worked at the first shop we opened. Others were mostly journalists or prison staff. Then, of course, there was a priest sitting on the other end of the room. No one in there looked happy. All of my employees had looks on their faces that resembled the expression Elaine had all morning. I could tell it was killing them to anticipate seeing one of their former bosses dying, a boss they used to love well. My day one employees came a long way with Elaine and I in terms of the business. But to them, the former boss was the one who got left behind, the one who should have been around with everyone else to see things finally blossom. One of my employees shot us a quick wave. I waved back, then led Elaine over to a seat right next to him. He exchanged hugs and greetings with us before we finally sat down. In front of us were two closed curtains blocking the security glass, which was where the execution was supposed to take place. After minutes of near-dead silence in the room, those curtains opened, revealing the warden and the execution team. The warden stood right next to the gurney, which was where Johnny was restrained and strapped down securely. For lines from the machine that delivered the injection extended all the way into both of Johnny's forearms. Johnny's face was already turned toward the audience as soon as the curtains opened. His body was shaking, and he constantly swallowed hard. He scanned the room with tears streaming from his eyes. The second he spotted Elaine and I, his face scrunched up harder than it ever did. This time he was clearly communicating. Please don't let them do this to me. He was terrified. The sight of Johnny being strapped to that gurney caused Elaine to wrap her arms around me. She started crying. The warden left the execution chamber. Then we heard his voice through an intercom soon afterwards. We are about to proceed with the court-ordered execution of Johnny Smith. In accordance with the laws of the state of Michigan, everyone is asked to remain seated and silent for the duration of the procedure, the warden announced. I turned my head and saw tears streaming down the faces of many of my employees. Elaine hugged me tighter and attempted to muffle the sounds of her cries with my body. Do you have any final words, Johnny? The warden asked over the intercom. Johnny paused for several seconds before saying, I'm not some animal who's being put to death. The guy who should really be in this chamber is still out there living his life. Elaine, before I go, I want you to really acknowledge the fact that I didn't kill our family. Elaine covered her ears as he spewed this. I turned and saw the priest beside us, cupping both of his hands together, whispering, It's all right, Johnny. Just make sure your heart is in the right place. Me and Johnny's eyes met. His fear and tear-filled eyes stared me up and down. The guy standing next to the machine must have gotten the signal from the warden. He flipped a switch on the machine, and multiple drugs began to pump through Johnny's veins. Johnny's fear-filled face turned confusion when he saw me grin at him. I gave Elaine a kiss on the back of her head, then reached in the inside of my jacket pocket. I slowly pulled out a pair of white sunglasses. Johnny's eyes lit up as the realization hit him instantly. My grin grew wider once I placed the shades on my face. No! Johnny panicked, his head rising from the gurney. Too late. The drugs knocked him unconscious seconds later. Within a few minutes, he was out of here. Everyone else left that prison sad and devastated. But secretly, I was happy. I was happy that Johnny finally made peace with himself. Happy that I now had peace with myself. Now that he's out of the picture, I was happy knowing that Elaine and I could live our lives together happily without Johnny interfering. Elaine and I can finally live without that nuisance. I was happy that I ran and grew the business by myself peacefully with no mishaps, while Johnny was locked away. It'll only get better now that I don't have to constantly talk to him on the phone anymore, or occasionally visit him. Our time together was great while it lasted, but I guess nothing good really lasts forever. I enjoyed the journey. Farewell, Johnny. Story 7. The open wound in my hand won't close. It started as a stupid accident. I was slicing chicken late at night, half watching some YouTube video, when the knife slipped, a deep, clean slice across my left palm. I remember the sound before the pain, a sickening SHHK through skin and tendon. I swore, dropped the knife, and clutched my hand. Blood poured out fast. I wrapped in a towel, called urgent care, and drove myself with one hand. They stitched it up 10 tight black threads, and the doctor said it would heal fine. Come back in a week. Keep it clean. That was 3 weeks ago. It still hasn't closed. Worse, it's wider now. I kept it clean, washed it carefully, applied antibiotic cream. But every time I unwrapped the bandage, the wound looked wrong. Not infected, just open, like the skin had forgotten how to grow. I went back to urgent care. A different doctor this time. He looked at the wound, frowned. Strange. Did you reopen it? No, I said. It just won't close. He re-stitched it tighter this time and gave me stronger antibiotics. I followed every instruction. 5 days later, I woke up to my bedsheet sticky with blood. The stitches had burst. The wound looked hungry, the skin on either side pulling apart, like it wanted to gape open. The meat inside looked darker, not infected, different, like something was moving just below the surface. I didn't go back. Something about the way the doctors touched it, how quickly they backed away, how they exchanged glances told me they didn't want to see it again either. Instead, I kept it covered. Started filming it, watching it, every night. Same setup. Lights off, infrared camera for my job. I do AV installs. Lens fixed on my hand while I slept. I didn't expect to catch anything. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, I twitched and turned, scratched at it in my sleep. The third night, something came out. It was just a frame or two. Had to go frame by frame to see it. A dark, thin shape, almost like a spider leg poked out of the wound. Then another. Then they slipped back in. The video ended with me mumbling in my sleep and rolling over. I watched it 10 times. That wasn't a dream. The wound pulsed around the edges, like it welcomed whatever that was. I haven't been able to sleep since. I keep watching it, keep recording. Every night the thing comes out for longer. On Thursday, I saw what looked like a face, small, featureless, gray. No eyes press up against the inside of my hand, like it was testing the boundary. It stared up at me from the inside of my own fucking flesh. I've started hearing whispers at night. They come from inside the walls at first, but eventually they settle around me, like static building inside my skull. It's always the same voice. Let it open. Let me out. Sometimes I dream I'm holding hands with myself, except the other me is hollow, and something is shifting behind his eyes. In the dream, he says, "You split the veil. We never forgot." I don't know what that means. I'm not religious, not spiritual, not into weird rituals or shit. I just cut my hand. That's all. But I think whatever I cut into wasn't just me. Last night, the wound reached my wrist. It didn't bleed. It just unzipped, smooth and silent. Skin curled outward like pages peeling back. There's no pain anymore. Just a low vibration like my hand is a tuning fork for something old and far away. I saw bones mine, but they were moving, rearranging, making room. For what? I don't know, but it's getting closer to the elbow now. I can't go to a hospital. I know they'll cut the arm off, and I think it'll keep growing anyway. It doesn't want out of my arm. It wants out of here. If anyone reads this, listen to me. Don't cut too deep. Don't let your wound stay, because once it gets out, I don't think it'll go.